In the past couple of videos, we've been working on how to make the squares and specialty stitches for this really fun bohemian style sampler scarf. And in this week's video, we're going to be joining it all together. Now please note this is not going to be an exact step-by-step tutorial, but more of a breakdown and guide along with a lot of tips to help get you started. Now if you missed those first two videos, you can find the links to them in the description box below the video, as well as at the end of this one. As a quick recap, the scarf that we're working on measures approximately 10 by 70 inches. We're using this beautiful scarf sold in stores as our reference guide. To obtain this measurement, I'm using a weight 4 cotton yarn with a 4mm hook, but you can use whatever yarn and hook that you have on hand to make your scarf. Just use that as your gauge. So where do we begin? If you look at the reference photo, you'll notice that the top and bottom is formed with the various granny squares. Both of these panels measure approximately 12 inches long, so I'd recommend that you use these images as a template to help you place your granny squares. Be sure to keep a tape measure nearby so you can use that to stay within that 10-inch and 12-inch window. If you remember from the granny square video, I recommended that you didn't add all the rounds to your mitered square, not until you did this portion. And this is exactly why, because as you're piecing it all together, you're going to notice that sometimes you'll need more or less rounds around that square. So this is where I would recommend that you just start playing with those rounds around the edges, deciding what works best. But be sure not to commit to the snip. I just made that up. But seriously, don't commit to snipping your yarn until you're sure that you've got the size that you want. One really important thing here as you're putting things together, if you watched that granny square video first and started making your squares, at that time I suggested that you make about 8 basic granny squares. And I think I flubbed up on that because once I started doing the measuring here, I found that the little mini squares worked better for the 4 squares that you see in the top panel. Now, if you went ahead and did all that work already, you can absolutely replace these 4 with those 3. It'll come to about the same width. But if you're really wanting to have the 4 like you see in the reference photo, then I would recommend that you go and make a few more of those mini squares because those are going to fit in better into that 10-inch window. As you're piecing everything together, you'll notice that you have some gaps, but if you look at the reference photo, they filled it in with stripes, and it's just basic granny stripes. Now, I haven't talked about this in the previous 2 videos, but I will be sharing how to do that in this one in the filler segment. So what I would recommend you do is just grab yourself your tape measure and then just jot down the measurements that you need to fill in those spaces. So for example, for my corner up here, I did about 5 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows of granny clusters, a little over 3 inches by 3 inches. I did go ahead and include a single crochet border. I just did single crochets all the way around with 3 single crochets in each corner. And then for this bottom portion, I ended up making this longer than it needed to be, so everything else got extended because of it. But if you're curious, it ended up being 9 inches. I really only wanted it to be 8. To work granny stripes, it's really easy to do. For a classic granny stripe, it's usually 3 double crochets per cluster. But for this one, I'm just doing 2 double crochets. And I'm actually going to do 2 double crochets together. Starting with a multiple of 3 plus 1. I'm going to do a chain of 13, that's 12 plus 1. Working into the 3rd chain from the hook, 1, 2, 3, create a double crochet into that chain. That's going to serve as your first cluster. Now all the way through, we're going to skip a chain and then work our 2 double crochets all the way across. Skip 2 doubles, skip 2 doubles. But if you want to do 2 double crochets together, you're going to chain 1. So yarn over, passing that skip stitch, going into the next one. We're going to behave as if we're doing our double crochet. Yarn over, pull through 2. But we're not completing our double crochet. We're going to do 1 more. So yarn over, going back into the stitch, pull your yarn through, yarn over, pull through 2. You'll have 3 loops on your hook. Now yarn over and pull through all 3. And that's 2 double crochets together. So we've essentially done a decrease, so to make up for that, chain 1 to bring that stitch back, And now we're just going to continue all the way across. Now we're just going to skip, going in, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, go back in, pull your yarn through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through all 3. That's 2 double crochets together, chain 1, and continue across. When you come to the end, skip a chain and then work your final 2 doubles or 2 together in that very last stitch. When you've completed your row, pay attention to how many clusters you have because it is going to alternate with each row. So for this one, for example, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In row 2, I'll only have 5. Row 3, I'll have 6 again. So it'll go 6, 5, 6, 5. Now you could continue doing this with one color, but if you do want to have these stripes, I recommend that you fasten off and rejoin with your next color now. Now you could do it a couple of different ways. The right way is to come back and complete your very last stitch with the new color. Or you can fasten off completely and then just turn your work and rejoin. Or you can be lazy, like I was with mine, and just complete that whole row and then bring in the new color and rejoin. Now this technically is going to show that transition of colors, but if you're going to add single crochets along the side, it really doesn't matter, and it does save you a little bit of time just doing it this way. At least the mental energy is saved for me. I like to just tie those sides together and then just continue on. Chain 2 or 3 and turn. Now we're just going to do our 2 double crochets in each space across. I'm going to do the 2 double crochets together. So working in that first space, 2 doubles. You can either just do 2 or 2 together. I'm doing 2 together with a chain 1 to cross over. And then I'm just going to continue across, creating my clusters with a chain 1 in between. Coming to the end. Chain 1. I want to do a double crochet just to give it a nice edge. And what you'll notice here is that it's going to change. Remember I said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here you'll see 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For the next row, you'll see 6 again. Okay, I'm bringing in my next color. Remember, I'm just doing it the lazy way here. And yes, you could be carrying these tails as you're working. That would probably be smarter, but I don't mind weaving in ends, so I'll just take care of it later. Now we're back to our gaps, so we're just doing our 2 double crochets. Do whichever style you want. I'm continuing on with the 2 together. Okay, you have one more little space hiding there. Go ahead and add your final cluster. There you go. And as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, 5, 6. And then the following row will be 5 again. So you get the idea. I'm just going to chain up and show you real quick, just so you get the idea. You'll just continue across. Just alternating those 2 rows. You just need to do a double crochet. And then you can double check. Here I just need 5. I did 6 this row. This row I only need 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, I'm on track. And you're just going to continue doing this until you are ready to fasten off. And then you can go ahead and add single crochets all the way around if you want, like I did here. I just try to keep it consistent. Whatever I did on one side, I try to do on the other. Just making sure to add 3 or even 5 single crochets on the corners. Depending on your yarn weight, you may need more than 3. Just stick with an odd number. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and add my granny stripes to this square and then just join it with the invisible join later to the bigger square. Okay, so I'm just fastening on in the corner. I'm going to chain up 2 to serve as my first double crochet, and then I'm going to do another double crochet. Now I'm just going to skip over and create my clusters. This is very, very similar to what I was showing you how to do in the very first video with the mitered squares. Same concept. I'm going to go ahead and change colors. I know it gets really tedious changing colors all the time, but it gives such a pretty look. Bring it in, pull it through, tie those together just to kind of hold everything in place. Chain 2 or 3, turn, and then work my double crochets across. Okay, just 1 double this time. And yes, I'm going to change colors again. And last row. Remember, your rows are always going to be alternating with the clusters. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that should align nicely. And then I'll just do the invisible seam later on. One thing I'd highly recommend is that you create a template for yourself. Just draw something down on a piece of paper so you don't forget how you've laid everything out to get that measurement accurate. And then also take a photo of this, because once you start seaming things together, it's really easy to forget where you put everything. There are a variety of ways that you can join your squares together. I would recommend that you pick your favorite, whether that's with a crochet hook or with a tapestry needle. My favorite join is the invisible join, and I'll go ahead and add a card here with other flat seam joins that you may be interested in. But this one I really love because it looks the same on both sides, and whether you're using the same color yarn or not, it's virtually invisible to the eye once you put it all together. So to do the joining technique, grab your neutral color yarn and your favorite tapestry needle. This is just a finishing needle by Susan Bates. It's just plastic, but it's really quick and easy for me to use, so that's what I'm going to use here. There's no real method here as far as what order I'm going to join things together, because I'm just going to do each one individually. The only thing I'd recommend is when you decide where you're going to join, take your yarn and at least double it, so you have plenty of yarn to work with. Here's an example of one that's already finished. These are the 3 X's I did before filming. And you can see it's a really lovely flat join on the front as well as on the back. I think I'm going to start here. I'm going to join all of these together, and then I'll join that to this and then just work my way up. So to join this, just grab the 2 squares that you want to join together and then do at least 2 times the length, maybe even a little bit more, just so you have plenty of room to work. You can either work flatly on a table surface, or you can pull your pieces up towards you, whichever is easiest for you. And basically all we're doing here is we're just going to go back and forth, going into the center of the stitches, and that's going to hide your stitches. Now, we don't have to even be really fussy with this because we're using the same color yarn, but basically, again, we're just going through the centers. So take your 2 pieces that you want to join, starting in a corner, just get into the center there. I'm going to do this fairly quickly, but if you want to see a slower version, I'll go ahead and add a link right here, as well as in the description box below the video. And then coming over to the other side, going into the center as well, just mirroring what you do from the other side. Now we're just going to go back and forth, sort of like a mattress stitch, and just go through the stitches, in through the center. Go to the other side, go through the middle. You want to feel a little bit of resistance as you're doing this. That lets you know that you're going into the stitches. If it goes through a little too easy, then those are the times it will show more. But again, this doesn't really matter because we're using the same color. And then when you come to the end, just tighten it. And that's what you have on the front. And that's what you have on the back. And then what I like to do is just straighten these edges out a little bit more. I just continue doing that, so I'll go ahead and join this, then I'll take this and join to this. When you come to sections like this, we're just going to pretend that we've been joining and joining and joining. More than likely these will be joined together already, but I just want to show you with an intersection. Just come in and then just go in a circle. And then come back to where you started. And then just continue on. Now this is the top panel of the scarf. So when you're finished with this, I would recommend that you tidy this up by maybe doing some single crochets. So when you come with your rows that you're building on, you'll have a nice area to attach to. You can apply the same thing that I'm going to do here to your sides when you get to that point. Now I know that my stitch count across is 37 for my scarf, so I want to make sure that I make this 37 stitches. So it looks like I'm going to have to do a little bit of increasing as I work, but I want to show you how you can use different size stitches to help straighten this all out. So I'm just going to fasten on in a corner, and I'm going to do a couple of single crochets in the corner before I start my stitches, just because I know I need them. So I've come up to the first divot or dip. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do some half double crochets in there to help bring it up nice and straight. And then just continue on with singles. Okay, back to the divot, so I'm just going to place a half double crochet in there. If it's really deep, you could even try a double crochet. Let's do 2. And there you go, much straighter. So the top row is all joined and nice and straight. And so once you get both of the panels completely done, then it's time to create your rows. Now, I'm going to go ahead and join this off camera, but it's essentially the same concept as what I just showed you with the top panel. You're just going to join everything together with your favorite stitching technique or joining technique. And then I would recommend here that you just start with a nice row of single crochets. Just straighten out the edges, just like I showed you in the previous segment. And then you're ready to start joining your different rows. Now, you can do any kind of variations that you want. If you look at the reference photo, you'll notice that they've done different sequences of the cable stitch with double crochets in between those, very similar to what I did here. But you can also just do very simple half double crochets, and even single crochets. As long as you're changing the colors, it's going to be really appealing to the eye, and nobody's really going to be paying attention to what kind of stitches they are. So once you have the panel ready and you're ready to start the body of your scarf, then the most important thing here is figuring out your stitch count for your stitches across. Now, if you watch the video about the specialty stitch, you'll know that my stitch count is 37 stitches across, but this will vary depending on the yarn and hook that you're using. And the main tip for that is, unless you're just doing double crochets or single crochets, it really doesn't matter. You can just stitch to whatever stitch count you want. But if you were working on something like the cable stitch from the previous video, then you do want to pay attention to that, and then everything else is going to line up with that specialty stitch. For example, this one took a multiple of 3 plus 1. So my stitch here is 37 stitches. So when I start attaching everything to the panel here, I want to make sure that I have a stitch count of 37. So then when I come to make this later on, as I'm working, it'll all match up. And that's why you saw here, I made sure that I did this edge with 37 stitches. Now, I know someone's going to ask me, how many rows do you need to do for the body of your scarf? And I'm going to give you a big fat, I don't know. What I do know is that the top and bottom panels combined come out to about 24, 25 inches. So you're looking at about 45 inches of stripes to create a 70-inch long scarf. So depending on your yarn and hook, that could vary on how many rows that's going to take. It's also going to depend on what kind of stitches you decide to use, because some of them are shorter and taller than others. Really, don't focus on the row count, focus more on that measurement, and just keep going for as long as you want. If you want it to be shorter than 70 inches, you won't have to do as many rows, but just use your eye and your tape measure as your guide for that. When you're completely done with your entire scarf, one thing I'd recommend is going around the edges with 2 or 3 rounds of single crochets. This will just help you bring it all together and give a really nice edge. The only tips for this that I really have is just to do single crochets evenly on all the sides. Instead of focusing on a stitch count, I'd focus more on making sure that everything lays nice and flat. If it's working up too wavy for you, then you need less single crochets. If it's working up too tight and curling up on you, then you want to add some more single crochets. If you have areas like this that have a little bit of a divot, you may want to do a half double crochet in there instead of a single, just to give it a little bit of height to help straighten things along. For your corners, I'd recommend 3 to 5 single crochets, probably 5 since you're working on a bigger curve, but use odd numbers to help yourself get around those corners. So I'm just going to make a little tassel, but if you want it to be longer, then just choose whatever length you want that tassel to be. Just wrap around something that length. But I'm just going to do it around my hand. The amount of wraps that you make is how thick it's going to get. So to do one like you see in the reference photo, you're going to need a lot of wraps. I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to make a little mini tassel, but the concept is the same. So you can make this as big or small as you like. So I'm just going to do, don't know, about 10, 15, 20 wraps around my hand. Sorry if that's making you dizzy. Okay, and then snip. And now you're just going to take that and snip it in half. You'll have something that looks like this. Grab another piece of yarn. This is going to be what you attach to your scarf. Just going into the center, create a double knot. If you want, you can add a pretty little bead here before you attach it to your scarf. So grab another stretch of yarn, and same thing, just do a nice tight double knot. And you can take those ends and weave it into the center. And there's your tassel. And then you'll just attach it to your corner. And then you can weave in those ends. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope this gave you enough information to join your pieces together. Once I finish mine, I'll go ahead and add it to the community tab or community page on the channel so you can see everything. If I come across any more tips or any information that I think you need, I'll add it to that post as well as in the description box below the video. I've had a couple of requests on how to make a beanie to go along with this. So if you'd like to see something like that, please let me know in the comments if you're interested in the beanie for this. It's really, really cute. It looks pretty easy to do, but I need to work on that a little bit. So let me know if that's really something you'd like to see, and I'll get on to that straight away. So in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.